Polyclay scraps? I've got a ton of them. What can I do with them?
I've got a Fire Mountain fix for that. Just like lack of sleep leads to dark circles, working with polymer clay leads to scraps. Now there's so many things you can do with scraps. So when they're like this with black, or if they have brown or grays in them, mixing them together won't make a pretty color. So what I like to do is make sure they're chopped up pretty well, as these are, but there's not enough contrast in here. So you can introduce a new color, just if you want a new color, or a lighter shade of clay, or a darker shade of clay, whatever enhances the contrast. And I usually like enough to be about the size of a small golf ball, or a small plum. So we're just going to take our scraps and compress them gently. We don't want to introduce air into them. And squeeze them, get them nice and compacted. And then we'll just do a little gentle rolling. Now we want to get some striping or striations in there, so we're going to twist quite a bit until you see a lot of striping and striations. Don't forget to pay attention to those ends. Now, if you don't think you've got enough interesting striping going on, and this one's actually not too bad, you can cut it in the middle. Sometimes that's where they're hiding with your blade, and look at that. That's pretty cool right there. But we're going to just flip those on each other's sides, recompress them into a snake, pull in our ends, give them a bit of a roll, and we're just going to twist them again. So we need lots of twisty, twisty excitement. When you like them, the striations or twists you get, you want to bring the ends in, and we're going to make this into a long sheet where the stripes go vertically. So with your roller, you flatten it a little bit, and then we're ready to flatten it even more with the stripes facing up through the largest setting of our pasta machine. Well, that's pretty, but it's time to do something more. I'm going to turn these stripes into a marbled effect, much like you'd see with paper. So you can use a needle tool, an awl, a knitting needle, or I prefer a bamboo skewer or a wooden toothpick, because the wood's going to pick up the clay and drag it. So holding it almost completely flat to the clay, I'm going to pull the clay down. My goal isn't to cut through the clay or even to get these score marks, which sometimes I leave in place, but I usually flatten them out. The goal is to create a drag line through all of these stripes, and I do this about every 1/4 inch or so. Now most of the time I would flip the piece over and do it from both sides, but I think you get the idea. Next, to make it more interesting, we're going to lift it up from our clay tile, lay it down, and just do the same thing in the opposite direction. And this gives us that lovely chevron patterning that marbled paper, and even when they work in pastry, the pastry world is known for, with frostings. Isn't that pretty? What am I going to do with it? I'm so glad you were wondering. I can use this veneer and leave the texture in place, or I can flatten it with my roller or my pasta machine. And depending on what I want to put it on, I have to determine my thickness. It can be the cover of a book, a box, or even a bookmark. Now I've turned my stripes so they're horizontal or parallel to my pasta machine. I'm going to roll it out on a very, very thin setting. And you can even bake this sheet and use a die cutter, decorative scissors, or just regular scissors to cut this into shapes, and I like to make bookmarks. Here's a piece that I made from scraps, and I wish I would have added a bit more contrasting color of clay, but you can see it's not very thick. It's about the thickness of cardstock, and I used some decorative scissors that you'd find in the scrapbook department to get that nice edge. One last thing I'd like to show you. When you work with a professional quality clay, like Fimo Professional, even when it's very, very thin, it's incredibly flexible, it's very durable, and it's very strong. And there's the Fire Mountain fix.